Verse 1 of chapter 2 says, "Now the days of David drew near that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man." Now, we saw last week that David had handed the kingdom off to Solomon in such a way that there would be no dispute over his reign and his assignment. As a matter of fact, Solomon was allowed to be able to sit on the throne as a co-regent with David at the same time while David was still alive. It said that David on his bed bowed down to Solomon and gave him that position and made it very, very well known. So his time now, David knows that he's going to die. So he calls his son in because he has some last-minute instructions and some encouragement that he wants to give him. And the first thing he says that I'm going the way of all the earth. Now, we have to understand that this particular point in time, although eternity is there for the saints of God throughout God's plan all along, it was not a well-known aspect of their belief system as far as the resurrection was concerned. And so their position is far different. When David says, I'm going the way of everything dies and I'm going to die, he didn't say, but, like we get to. You see, we know that everything dies. We know that there is a way of the earth, but we're not subject to that way. Do you guys realize that while this body in its physical aspects may fail and will fail, all right? Sometimes when we least expect it, but that we saw last Sunday that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. You remember what the Apostle Paul said? He says, hey, I don't know if I was dead or alive, but I wound up in heaven instantly at the point that he believed himself to be so. And so we know that it's different for us, and I got to tell you what, for me that's very exciting. The idea that I don't have to be afraid of death. Now I've told you, I don't like the idea of dying. Okay? I don't like the idea of how I'm going to die. I want to go like really quick. I don't want to go a little bit at a time, you know? And so because of that, I'm going to do everything I can to be here as long as I can. I want to be here as long as I can. As long as the Lord would tarry and doesn't come back for all of us, I'm going to do everything I can to try to maintain my relationship with good health. I'm going to try to everything I can to maintain my relationship with wisdom in and around my wife and kids so that none of them want to kill me. I'm going to try to do the things that would allow me to be able to spend as much time as the Lord would allow. But you know what? If that day comes and I get the opportunity to call my children or to call those that are here to my bedside and say, you know what? I'm getting ready to check out. My time has come. The Lord has been good. I don't have to look at them and say, goodbye. I get to look at them and I get to say, I will see you forever. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that something that we all get? I mean, it'll be sad in the parting, but it will only be for a moment. This entire life is told to us in Scripture as being a vapor. It's that fast. It's a pff, and it's gone. And so the eternity that lies before us is so much better that we're able to take and to look forward to this in a way like no other can except for that who is the saint of God. So David calls Solomon in and he says, hey, be strong. Prove yourself a man. Well, I got to tell you what, there is always the desire on the part of a parent for their kids to do well, but there's more of a desire on the part of a man for his son to do well. Not discounting the moms. But there is something, and guys, if you have a son, you know what I'm talking about. You just think about it and you start grunting. It's like, male child. I want him to do good. I want him to be strong. I want him to prove himself a man. And the first time that he does, the first time that he's running and he crashes into something and he just pops right back up, you just go, oh man, that's my boy. That's my boy. Dad, look. I remember a time when Jason, in his younger days, had a tendency to fall off of things like skateboards and bicycles. And he came to us one day. We were out at Mills Park. We were preparing for a church picnic. As a matter of fact, I was setting up the stage for the music. We were going to have a big concert in the park. It was wonderful. Jason was over on his rollerblades over at the little whoop-de-doo thing there at Mills Park, and he comes walking over and he goes, Dad, I think I broke my finger really bad. And he stuck his hand up. And this finger was going in a direction that it should not go. It was kind of pointed down and out to the side, and I just looked at him and I said, son, yes, you have broken your finger really, really bad. And it was at that point in time that he kind of went, Good thing was he was on wheels. He still had his skates on. So his mom got on one side of him, I got on the other side of him. We just wheeled him to the car, took him to the emergency room. Fortunately, it wasn't broken. It was dislocated. They zapped him with a little bit of Novocaine, and the doctor straightened it out. And he just thought, after they hit it with the Novocaine, he thought it was the coolest thing in the world. He's looking at that going, man, this is really cool. I said, yeah, it's cool when it don't hurt, huh? But the pride that goes along with this, wanting to see our kids do well, wanting to see them be able to achieve, is very, very significant in the life of especially a man and his son. So David calls him in. He says, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do wherever you turn, that the Lord may fulfill his word which he spoke to me concerning, saying, if your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Now, there's a lot of things that I wish that I would have taught my son when he was growing up. And I got to tell you, I think that every father feels that. And even if we're able to take and to give them certain things and instill in them, I mean, my dad created in me the ability to be handy, mainly because we were poor and we didn't replace it. We had to fix it or rebuild it or redo it, right? And I wasn't able to give as much of that to my son as I would have liked to. And so now that he is a proud parent of 4 and a homeowner, it's kind of fun to watch him because he doesn't necessarily have those homeowner fix-it skills. He's learning them. He's game because he's poor, and you can't hire anybody to do anything. I mean, if you're poor, you got to do that stuff, right? But with everything that I was able to and not able to teach him, there's one thing that was more important than anything else. And this is really where it comes down to how it is as parents we need to instill this in our kids. Because here's the thing. I want my children and my grandchildren to be successful. I want them to be prosperous. I want them to live a very joyous and a very rewarding life. I want them to do well in their life in the sense of having all the good things that come to them. But let me tell you what. And don't take this the wrong way, because some people, when I say this, they think it's just, oh, that's terrible. I'm not as concerned about their prosperity, their education, and their wellness, and even if they achieve greatness. None of that means anything if they don't know Jesus Christ. I will accept them however they are based on their relationship with Jesus Christ and pray and hope for the rest and lead and guide and direct them. But you know what? If they have nothing but Jesus Christ, they've got it all.
And that was our motto in schooling.
Yeah.
In the very beginning. I didn't care if they were finished and they were as dumb as a brick as long as they loved.
I wasn't going to say that, but that was basically, yeah. That's the part I didn't say. Yeah, I didn't care if I don't care if my kids turned out, to be as dumb as a brick, because people would look at us and talk about the fact that we were homeschooling and we were going to grow up a bunch of social retards. Now, you've met all my social retards, right? Right? You met our kids, and they're all just totally backwards, and they don't understand anything, and they don't have any social skills. I mean, those. Well, yeah, and two of them we had to send away to Bible college just because we were hoping they would gain some skills. You know what I mean? But see, here's the thing: we didn't. It was like, you know what? The only thing in our heart and our mind, and we weren't gonna allow there to be something lacking. It wasn't like we set out to provide anything. But the main thing that was important was that they had a relationship with Jesus Christ above all, before anything else, and that was the thing that was important. The admonishment to be strong, to be a man. And it's interesting because it amazes me how it is that so many people think that walking with Jesus Christ is a sign of weakness. It amazes me how many men who profess to be Christians are afraid to let other people know that they're a Christian because they're afraid their buddies are going to think that they're weak or that they're sissies. Let me tell you what, Christianity is not for wimps or sissies. It is not for unmanly men. If you're going to be a true Christian and a follower of Jesus Christ, you're going to be a bigger man than the other people that are not. Because it takes more to resist the things of the world. It takes more character, more strength, more intestinal fortitude to withhold and to stay out of the things of the world than it does to give in to them. And so if anything, we should be walking around not as a badge of honor wearing our pride, but in pride of the Lord, saying through His strength I can do all things. I love the examples that we're looking at. David was not a wimpy guy. As a matter of fact, we've seen his exploits. We know what he went through. This was a guy that, as a young teenager, whooped a giant with a rock and a sling. All right? How many of us, though, sometimes have this image that because of our relationship, well, you know, and there's those wonderful bumper stickers, you know, real men love Jesus. And that's great. And that's, you know, I mean, you know, I'm hoping that the guy that's sporting that on the back of his car is walking that way. Because the reality is, it takes a lot of guts to be a Christian. Should never be ashamed of the gospel and the salvation that comes through Jesus Christ. But David encourages Solomon to walk in the ways of the Lord, and then he gives some specific aspects. Listen to these. The first one he says, keeping His statutes. Now, the statutes would have referred to the laws and that which pertain to the practices in the temple. The sacrifices and the procedures and those things that were added to. The statutes were that which was in addition to the Ten Commandments, because we'll see that in just a moment. And today you might say that this is likened to, because we're not statute keepers. We're not trying to keep the 613 rules and regulations and statutes of the Hebrews as handed down by Moses. But you would equate that today to what I believe is equal to that, is being a part of a fellowship. Is doing those things that Christians do as a part and being part of the body of Christ. Oh, it's not by command or demand. It's not a matter of a rule or a regulation. But if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to be found in a place where Christians hang out. If you're going to truly be a Christian, you're going to be involved in and engaged in acts of service, because that's what we do as Christians. If you're going to lay claim to the name of Christian and be in the place of being recognized as one, it shouldn't be difficult for those that know you to look at you and go, wow, I never knew you were a Christian. And he says the commandments. The Ten Commandments. And again, we're not under the law, but you know what? The law has not passed away as being the perfect standard of God. And it should be something that we not only respect, but we look up to, because by looking up to and recognizing God's perfect standard, what does it do? It drives us to our knees and to the feet of Jesus Christ because of His grace and mercy. His judgments. Judgments. Well, you see, throughout what was given to Moses and throughout what was written through Deuteronomy and through all of the instructions given to Israel, there were certain things that were predetermined as judgments for certain types of actions or crimes. Certain crimes that required a particular judgment that were given and written down. First-degree murder, for example, was that which was considered to be a crime equal to and needing of death, requiring a death sentence. It's where we get our corporal punishment laws here in this country, which sometimes work and sometimes don't. But the idea was that there were judgments, there were things that were given in the law that said, if this happens, do this. And so what David is saying, he's saying, son, follow what you've been given. Follow the Word of God. Follow the statutes. Follow the commands and follow the judgments. And then he says, also follow the testimonies. The testimonies. Well, what is the testimony of God? Well, for us, and again, it would have been different in Solomon's mindset because he would have been focusing purely on the Old Testament. Well, our testimony of God lies in His Son, Jesus Christ. And the fact that God does not change. Now, there's a lot of folks in the world that want to change God's identity and make Him into something that His Word does not present. They want to make Him willing to take and to be accepting of things, such as sin. Right? Our God doesn't do that. We know that God doesn't change, that He is the same today, tomorrow, and forever, and there's not going to be any changing with Him, and as such, that's part of that testimony. And so if we're going to keep the testimony of our God, then we have to let Him stay God. We can't turn Him into something of our own making. And I can't think of any better time or more important time that we would look at and recognize these aspects, especially even up into and concerning the law of God. Now, I'm not trying to make us a bunch of legalists. But people see the law of God, the statutes, the precepts, the things that are given to us in God's Word, you realize that for those that would reject it, this is considered to be very, very restrictive. Well, it's a rule book, and only those that are really kind of deranged and not too bright follow a set of rules for a living. I mean, after all, be your own man, be your own woman, go your own way, do your own thing. You don't need a God, and if you choose to, well, it's a sign again of what? Of weakness. Well, not so much. It's amazing how it is that I'll see people of faith portrayed as those that are lunatics. My oldest daughter at the house and I have kind of been hanging out a little bit more because of her sisters being gone, and she's not in here right now, so I won't embarrass her, but it's kind of like, we're just spending a little extra time with her because, it's a transition for her too, right? And so we've been watching some movies and things of that nature together, and it's the last couple of things that we've seen, there were two instances where those that had a faith in God, although one of them not so appropriate, were literally just portrayed in the media as being totally whacked out. Have you noticed that? Anybody that has faith is a religious zealot, is a nut, is unstable. Okay? Their religion and their belief and their faith actually causes them to be deranged from what is normal, right? And it amazes me how that portrayal, and because of that, there's a lot of folks that start out really strong in the Lord. They'll come to the Lord. They'll receive forgiveness. Their sins will be forgiven. They'll be relieved of that burden. They'll start developing a relationship with Jesus Christ, and all of a sudden the world starts coming down on them, and they start backing off. They start changing and becoming more like the ninja Christian than the one that is out there. And when I say ninja, I'm not talking about fighting for the faith. I'm talking about invisible in their faith. Right? They start camouflaging who they are because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want people to know. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to have the pressure of someone coming against them. And you know what? The workplace, man, if the guys knew I was a Christian, man, at the workplace, it would be all over. They would be on me every single day. There would be no rest. I had that experience, and it wasn't easy. I mean, I spent quite a long time in prison. And in doing so, of course, working there is nice. I got to come home at night. That was a good thing. But it was not necessarily a popular place to be the run-of-the-mill Christian. But it was interesting how I found that just by not giving in to the temptation of concealing it or playing along with the rest of the guys, when they crashed and burned, they were the first one at my door going, can I talk to you for a minute? And you've all experienced that. They just come around and go, you got a minute? You're here because I'm a Christian, aren't you? Yeah, come on in. As a matter of fact, for years over at my office door at the maximum security prison out in Ely, I had a sign that said, if you want to know, just ask. That's all it said. If you want to know, just ask. Because, see, it was a violation of the policy for me to speak openly to somebody about Jesus Christ unless they asked me. And so people would come in and go, well, what's that mean? I said, I am so glad you asked. Come on in, let me talk to you. David says, son, stay right with God. His word, His ways, and you will prosper. Moreover, in verse 5, you know also that Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me what he did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel, Abner the son of Ner and Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. He shed the blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war on his belt that was around his waist and on his sandals that were on his feet. Therefore, do according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave. David moves to some unfinished business. He goes from the aspect of telling his son to walk in the ways of God, and now he's going to come around and talk about this cousin of his by the name of Joab. Joab was a very powerful and a ruthless individual. Had been with David since the beginning, had been loyal to David, but also loyal to his own intentions and his own agendas. And there were times when David had specifically told him to do or not to do something, and well, Joab just did it on his own, especially in the areas of vengeance or revenge. David, I believe, had just instructed his son to keep all the statutes and to keep all of the judgments. And yet David knew in his heart and knew that he had not done so. You see, the judgment for Joab in the taking of innocent life and the shedding of innocent blood. Now understand, all of the encounters that he had that was tied to war and to the battlefield, all of the men that he killed, which I'm sure were hundreds, were all that which was acceptable in the context of battle. But when you take life in peacetime, it's considered murder. And first-degree murder, the only ruling for that was that he should have been put to death. And so now David, as he starts drawing to the end, he looks to his son and he says, "Son, you've got to do something about this. As I've just instructed for you to follow the judgments, this has to be made right." Now, we can speculate all day long about why David didn't do anything about this. We can speculate as to why it was that he had kind of either looked the other way. Maybe it was because Joab had been there since the beginning. And understand, David wasn't a choir boy. David was a military man. There were things that happened in the conquest. We know that there were times when David kind of went sideways and kind of became what do you call those guys? A soldier of fiction in relationship to being a mercenary. And he was out just taking for himself. So there were things that he had done. And maybe it was that, Joab knew where the bodies were buried. He knew the secrets. He had power. He had influence. He had this thing. Maybe David was afraid to confront him because of this power. Maybe there was something that he didn't want to have come out. But here now at the end of his life, he says, don't let him die a natural death. He needs to be held responsible for the murders that he committed. He needs to die for his crimes. And it's interesting because as I was reading through this, I got to thinking about how it is that from generation to generation, so often, the things that were wrong are left undone. For most of my life, I've grown up in a time when it was acceptable to blame parents for the troubles and the outcome of the kids. It's been going on for many generations to the point to where if someone is having trouble, if somebody is struggling, if somebody doesn't have the ability to be able to put things together, it's always like, well, the problem is that my father didn't love me, my mother didn't pay attention to me, I didn't get, and there's this, for many years, man, this thing was just over the top. But then we found out that it's not as fun being dysfunctional if everybody's dysfunctional. Because everybody became dysfunctional. Is anybody in here functional? We're all dysfunctional. We all come from crazy, whacked out families. We all come from crazy homes. We all come from life and things that have affected us and come through us. We've all been in situations that are stressful. We've all got everything. And as soon as everybody got it, it didn't become as popular for people to have it anymore. Have you noticed that? Oh, there's still a lot of excuses. There's still a lot of schisms, and there's still a lot of diseases, and there's still a lot of stuff where we blame and we account for. But the reality is that when it really comes down to it, it's not as popular to be dysfunctional if everybody else is dysfunctional too. Now, I'm not making fun, and I'm not disregarding or rejecting the fact that there is harm that can be done to the minds and to the hearts of people, and that we are in some way or another all a product of what our life has been up to the moment. We are all a combination of the things that we've experienced in our life. That's true. But what I also know is that we are told that through the power of Jesus Christ, through the power of His Holy Spirit, that we are able to become brand new. That the old things pass away, and behold, all things become new. That we become new creations in Jesus Christ as Jesus Christ is in us. We don't have to succumb to that which was. We are able to succumb and to give in and to take and subject ourselves to that which is Jesus Christ. Oh, does it happen all at once? Nah, not necessarily. I mean, it comes by revelation in a lot of people's lives that all of a sudden they realize one day by the power of the Holy Spirit that they don't have to be the person that they were told that they were going to be. They don't have to live out the legacy that was left behind based on what had been done to them. And I tell you what, I have seen some incredible... It amazes me sometimes when I'll see somebody and I'll know them for several, 2-3 years or whatever, and we have this wonderful relationship, and they look like the most stable person in the world. You know what I'm talking about? And then one day you sit down, you have lunch with them, and they tell you their story. And you go, whoa. You're new, aren't you? Yeah. It ain't the old me, man. The old me was really messed up. But through Jesus Christ, all things can be made new. But I see here that in order for that to take place, in order for there to be this aspect of becoming new, there has to be the willingness to put to death that which is in need of dying. It may be that we need to confront it now, or that it's passed on and we need to just allow it to be dead in order for us to be able to move on. And David instructs Solomon, he says, hey, you need to make right the mistakes from my past. The things that I didn't do need to be made right. And guys, we can all put to death the sins of our past. And if you're here tonight and you're still struggling with that stuff, and we do, because you know what? Satan has got an incredible ability to remind us of our sin. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, something that's crazy, something that maybe hasn't popped up for years and years and years. A few years back, we were walking through a department store. I think it was Target. Yeah, it was Target. And we were walking through the yeah, I got you. It wasn't Walmart. It was Target. No. And we're walking through the music section, right? And you know how they got those boards in there where you can push all the different things and it gives you the sampler pack of the thing, right? And it's playing a song from like the 80s, late 70s, 80s, and I tell you what, it was amazing. This song was on, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because then half of you will be like, "Oh, I remember that song," right? But my mind went, pew! And I was in a place that I have not been in probably 25 years in my mind, and all of a sudden it was like, I don't want to be there. And so I ran at the little thing and I started looking for, where's the Christian hits? We changed the music, but it's amazing how quickly and how that information and those things are still in there, and yet we're able to take by the power of God and through the Spirit of God and through what Christ has promised us as dwelling within us and put those things to death. Does it mean that they didn't happen? No, but it means that they no longer have power and control and can exercise any type of authority, or, as we will see, any kind of curse upon us, and that curse can be broken for the next generations. He goes on in verse 7, he says, "But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. So they came to me in the field from Absalom, your brother." That's interesting. David moves from the sin of Joab and says, take care of that. And he switches gears and he goes right over to saying that you need to bless Barzillai. On one hand, there was the need to show kindness and loyalty. On the other hand, there was the need to fix a mistake from the past. And, sometimes with dealing things in our past, if we want to take and put it to death, we sometimes have to do it by killing it with kindness. Sometimes we just need to go fix something that needs to be fixed, and the only way to fix it, as much as we would like to go kill that person, we need to go be kind to them. And we see that example here. He says, and you have with you Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite from Baram, who cursed me with a malicious curse in the day that I went to Manaman. But he came down to meet me at Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now therefore do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man, and know what you ought to do to him, but bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. Now you may recall this story. This was that guy as David is fleeing, and he's running from his son Absalom, who is trying to take over the kingdom. And David's packed up his stuff, and he's got his whole family and all these people that are going with him, and they start making their way out of town. And this crazy old kook comes out, the Shimei comes out, and he starts yelling at him and cursing at him and throwing rocks at him and kicking dust up, right? He's calling him all kinds of bad names. He's calling him a murderer. He's saying, you stink, David, doing all this stuff. And Abishai, you remember, he goes to David and he says, hey, boss, let me go take this guy's head off for you. And David says, no, I don't want you to do that. How do I know that God is not allowing him or has sent him to do that? And it was a moment for David where he was questioning a lot of things. But the reality is once again, this guy had just cursed the king of Israel. The king appointed by God. And for that, he was deserving of death. Now, some have suggested that what David is doing here now is he's kind of extracting a little payback for the things that he didn't do. The things that he should have done that he didn't do. And now it's what it is through his son, since he's no longer capable or able to do this, because he made a promise not to kill this Shimei guy, that he'll allow his son to go and take care of him because the guy really deserved to die and he didn't like him, but he messed up. And I don't think that's really what was happening. I don't think that it was David looking back and saying, I want to go extract vengeance or payback on these guys. I think what David was more concerned with is that he had failed to do that which was right according to the law. He had failed to do that which was right according to what God had given them, and he did not want to see the kingdom go forward under Solomon under a shadow or under a cloud or under a curse, as God would have held against him his failings to do that which was right. I think he had in mind the example that he saw with Saul's family. You remember when Saul had mistreated the Gibeonites? Saul was supposed to take, and we saw this in Samuel, Saul was supposed to take and treat fairly, and he didn't. And because of that, at some point in time down the road, as David now was king, there was a famine that came upon the land. Saul had been deposed. He was gone. But the famine came, and David sought the Lord. And the Lord said, the problem is that there's a curse on the land because of what Saul had done to the Gibeonites. You go to them, and you ask them what they want in exchange. And so he did. And you know what they wanted? They wanted 7 of Saul's descendants to put to death and to hang. And that's exactly what they did. So I can't help but think that David's thinking, man, I can't leave anything undone. I can't allow there to be something where there's the shedding of this innocent blood, which we're told in Scripture under the law brings a curse upon the land. It has to be justified. It has to be made right. He can't allow these things that were left undone to be undone, because it may have a future impact on Solomon going forward. So I don't think it was vengeance. I think it was a matter of just trying to clear the table and clear the slate in order that there would not be any future aspects of harm coming against the kingdom. It says, so David, in verse 10, rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The period of that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. Then Solomon sat upon the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Well, we'll see. Now, Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. So she said, do you come peaceably? And he said, peaceably. Moreover, he said, I have something to say. And she said, say it. Then he said, you know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel had set their expectations on me, that I should reign. However, the kingdom has been turned over and has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Now, ask one petition of you, or I ask one petition, and do not deny me. And she said to him, say it. And he said, please speak to King Solomon, for he will not refuse you, that he would give me Abishag the Shunammite as a wife. So Bathsheba said, very well, I'll speak for you to the king. Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed down to her and sat down on his throne, and he had a throne set for the king's mother. So she sat at his right hand. Then she said, I desire one small petition of you, and do not refuse me. And the king said to her, ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you. So she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah, your brother, as wife. You can't make this stuff up. The intrigue, the deception. Right? I mean, can you see this in a mini-series drama? Here comes Bathsheba. And remember, she must have had some sort of really great position in the palace with David, because she didn't even have to be announced when she went into his presence. Now she comes before her son. Now it's her son. And mothers have privileges with their sons that they shouldn't have, but they do. And they extract them by guilt. Okay? I gave birth to you. I know, I've heard this story. But she goes in and she says, hey, I need to have a word with you. And he says, oh, Mom, come on in. Let me make a seat for you. He puts her right on his right hand, right by the throne. And he says, what can I do for you? She says, I need to ask you something, and don't tell me no. I need you to do this for me. He goes, oh, if you ask, I'll give it to you. In order to draw a little understanding of what's going on here, we need to remember that Solomon had spared Adonijah's life under the condition that he would not make waves. That he was supposed to just go home and be quiet and not try to make any runs on or make any challenges to his authority or any claim to the throne. And while this request may not seem like such a big deal, especially in a culture to where, man, Solomon's going to have a few wives. He's going to have a few women in his life by the time he's done. What's one handmaiden? What's what would have been probably a concubine of David's to be made a wife for this Adonijah? What was the big deal? Well, it was a big deal. It was a huge deal. You see, any time that a king died or was replaced or was dethroned, that which was his in possession, including personal, such as wives and concubines, became the possession of the incoming king as a symbol of their rule and authority. And to give any portion of that away meant that you were sharing your authority. So what Adonijah is asking for is not just, hey, can I have that gal that was David's nurse? He said, no. What he's saying is that I want a part of the authority and rule. I was supposed to be the king. The people wanted me to be a king. Don't you remember we threw the big party? We had the big inauguration thing. And I know, by the way, I understand Solomon's is God's choice, but I want to be king too. And so if he will just but give me this woman as a wife, it will establish that I have got authority in the kingdom. I think it's interesting, though, how Bathsheba played this. Because it almost looks like, wow, whose side is she on? I mean, here she tells Adonijah, okay, sure, I'll go ask this for you. She knows it's wrong. She knows what he's asking for, and I think she knew exactly what he was up to, and she knew exactly what Solomon was going to do. And I think that's why she brought it in the way that she did. Look at the response. And the king answered and said to his mother, now, why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he is my brother. For him and for Abiathar the priest and for Joab the son of Zeruiah. Solomon sees exactly what's happening immediately. He says, hey, why don't you just ask that I turn over the kingdom to him? Why don't you just tell him, okay, no problem. You come in, you can be the new king, and bring that priest with you, and bring that military guy Joab that I have to deal with. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, may God do so to me, and more so, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and has set me on the throne of David my father, and who has established a house for me, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. I think Bathsheba knew this. I think she knew that when Adonijah came to her and asked her to go do this, that he had basically signed his death warrant. Solomon doesn't take any time. He doesn't hesitate. The move has been revealed to take over the kingdom, or to share the power. And at times, I think when we look at accounts like this in Scripture, we can get caught up in the drama and what even seems like the brutality of it. How many of you are shocked when we see the brutality coming out of the Middle East? This horror of this inhumanity, this brutality of just instant executions by beheading and by burnings. I mean, this is a very, very violent society. at least in comparison to what our American criminal justice system has become. And yet, the reality is that what we see here is we see that while it may be seen as harsh and intolerant, and at times even Christians are seen as harsh and intolerant, the reality is that there needs to be a quick discernment as to what is of God and what is not of God, and a willingness to take and divide between the two. And we're losing that. You realize that we in this country right now, especially with what's going on recently in the news, that we're, as Christians, being compared to the same as satanic organizations and religions that are being led by Satan himself? Oh, there's no difference between the Christian and these other groups. There's no difference. It's the same thing. They're all the same. They've all done the same things. They've all done, well, no. I serve a God that says that we're supposed to love our enemies, that we're supposed to take and preach a gospel of salvation that is freely given without coercion, without any type of force, that you receive it based on it being a gift given by the Son of God who loved us first, and because of His love has made that love known through Jesus Christ. That is nothing like a terrorist who says you will either believe the way I do or I'll take your head. It's a different system, a different process. There is no. But there's this comparison aspect of how it is there's supposed to be no difference between the two. Guys, those that refuse to acknowledge or have disdain for God, the one true and living God, will have no desire for evil to be restrained. And it's a dangerous thing. There'll be no desire for evil to be put to death. There'll be no desire to take and to challenge that which is evil if there is not an adherence to and an understanding of the things of the one true and living God. Absence of God, evil is not important. We kind of see that, don't we, in certain circles? Oh, they're not evil, they're just misunderstood. Oh, it's not evil, they're just like us. They just have a gripe or a grudge that they're trying to carry out. They're just misinformed. If we'll just give in to their demands, then they'll stop cutting our heads off. For those that will deny God, there's no reason to be good and to war against evil. So King Solomon in verse 25 sent the hand of Ahiah the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down and he died. And Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go to Anthroth, to your fields, for you are deserving of death, but I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord before my father David, and because you were afflicted every time my father was afflicted." So Solomon removed Abiathar from being priest of the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord which was spoken in concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. Even though Abiathar's crime of turning against and siding against David was also worthy of death, well, Solomon decides to stay the execution. He says, "I'm not going to kill you right now. I'm going to send you to your home. I'm going to send you back to the fields. You're no longer the high priest. You're going to be a farmer. So basically, you're going to go live in exile. And I'm going to allow that because, well, you carried the Ark of the Covenant. Because at the times that my father was being afflicted, when he was in danger, when he was in battle, when he was come against by Absalom, you were on his side. You were faithful to him. So I'm going to stay this execution and give you an opportunity to live." And it says that this prophecy was fulfilled. And guys, we had to go back to Samuel again and remember Eli's sons who were evil. Eli, the head priest, the high priest, his sons were evil. They were bilking the people. They were charging the people. They were doing all kinds of rotten and terrible things. And ultimately they lost their lives because they took the Ark of the Covenant out into battle and they weren't supposed to. And there was a prophecy that was made at that point in time that this lineage of Eli would cease to be in the priesthood, and it ended with Abiathar. He was the last of the line of Eli, and therefore the prophecy now is fulfilled as Zadok becomes the high priest. Then news came to Joab, for Joab had defected to Adonijah, though he had not defected to Absalom. So Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord, where he took hold of the horns of the altar. And King Solomon was told, Joab has fled to the tabernacle, and there he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, go strike him down. So Benaiah came to the tabernacle of the Lord, and he said to him, thus says the king, come out. This idea of seeking sanctuary within a house of God is something that's been around there for a long time. I mean, we've all seen it in movies where somebody is like on the lam or they're on the run and they run into a church and there's a standoff because, in those days the police wouldn't kick the doors down of a church and go in because it was considered a sanctuary. Oh, and it didn't guarantee that the person was going to be able to withstand against what was coming against them, but it bought time. It allowed there to be the opportunity for maybe a hearing for a trial. We know later on in the life of Israel that there was the establishments of cities of refuge for those who had been accused of a killing, but not necessarily a murder. And so that they would not be put upon by the avenger of blood or by a revenge killing, they could run to these cities. Well, he's kind of using the temple or the horns of the altar as this. He goes in and he grabs a hold of it, hoping to figure out a defense. And he said, no, but I will die here. And Benaiah brought back word to the king, saying, thus Joab answered me. And the king said to him, okay, we'll go do it. That's pretty resolute. Do as he said, and strike him down and bury him, that they may take away from me and from the house of my father the innocent blood which Joab shed. So the Lord will return his blood on his head, because he struck down 2 men more righteous and better than he, and killed them with the sword, Abner the son of Ner, the commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, the commander of the army of Judah. Though my father David did not know it, their blood shall therefore return upon his head, the head of Joab, and upon the head of his descendants forever, but upon David and his descendants, upon his house and his throne, there shall be peace forever from the Lord. So Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, went up, and he struck and he killed him, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. And the king put Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, in his place over the army. And the king put Zadok, the priest, in his place of Abiathar. So now, basically, the government is in place, and we're ready to move on. It says, then the king sent and called for Shimei, and he said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem, and dwell there, and do not go out from there anywhere, for it shall be on the day that you go across the brook Kidron, know for certain that you shall die. Your blood shall be on your own head. Again, Solomon decides to show mercy. He decides to allow Shimei the opportunity to have a stay of execution. He says, okay, but I'm going to watch you. And the implication here is that Shimei was more than just this crazy old coot that went out and cursed King David. He was a subversive. He was one that was looking to take and to overthrow David's authority in the kingdom. And he'd probably booked Absalom in the fight and lost. And that's why afterwards he came out and was all apologetic. And so he's going to now be watched a little bit closer. And Shimei said, hey, your saying is good, as my lord the king has said, and so your servant will do. So Shimei dwelt in Jerusalem many days. Now it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 slaves of Shimei ran away to Achish, and the son of Maacah, the king of Gath. And it was told to Shimei, saying, look, your slaves are in Gath. So Shimei arose, saddled a donkey, and he went to Achish at Gath to seek his slaves. And Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath, and Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had come back. Then the king sent and called for Shimei, and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord, and warned you, saying, now know for certain that on the day that you go out and travel anywhere, that you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word I have heard is good. Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you? And the king said, moreover, Shimei, you know, as your heart acknowledges, all the wickedness that you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord will return your wickedness on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada. He went out and he struck him down, and he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon. I would think that there was a lot more in the transition, but these kind of sum it up. And I think that it's really interesting, and I want to just close on this point. I think that we need to look in our own lives as to what's running us and what's ruling us. What's ruling us in the areas of the contention for the throne that God wants to sit on in our lives? Do we have an Adonijah? in our life that is competing against us? Do we have something that is trying to lay claim to this throne of our life that we want to put Jesus on, and we haven't yet done what needs to be done, which is to put it to death? Is there something that we're holding on to almost like a Joab? Is there a part of us that we're relying on in our battles? Is there something that we're holding on to and we're putting our faith in and we're putting our reliance in because of our might and what we perceive to be our ability to be able to fight against it, rather than, again, as we see here, putting it to death? And then finally, who's leading us in the ways of the Lord? Are we truly being led by the Holy Spirit? Are we taking and coming to the Lord and asking Him to do that within us, that He would do through the power of His Spirit? Or do we have somebody like an Abiathar, a priest that is, somewhat self-serving? Are we manipulating the things of God in our lives in order to be able to have our way rather than God's way? I don't know. Each of us have got the questions to answer. When it comes to putting those things to death, exiling them in a proper place, making sure that they can't get to us. If we don't, we'll see what happens, because the story is far from over. Read chapter 3 and 4 for next week. All right? Good stuff? I like it.